so-called documentary, which was more of a propaganda video, if you like, in a two-part series, was an absolutely disgraceful piece of shoddy journalism. You know, the reality was that Narendra Modi, as Chief Minister, had done his best. I don't conflate the two issues at all. I mean, obviously, the so-called documentary, which was more of a propaganda video, if you like, in a two-part series, was an absolutely disgraceful piece of shoddy journalism, with an attack on Narendra Modi, both in his time as Chief Minister of Gujarat and then in his time as Prime Minister. Completely full of innuendo and slurs. It should never have been broadcast by the BBC. And of course, because the BBC has a worldwide reputation, people think, oh my goodness, this must be true. But it was produced by an external organisation, overseen by the BBC, and then broadcast as the truth. Well, it's far from the truth. I mean, it dismissed, for a start, it actually didn't look in detail at the causes for the Gujarat riots 20 years ago, and it certainly didn't look at the all-important fact that the Supreme Court had thoroughly investigated all the claims against Narendra Modi and found there not a shred of evidence to support them. So, you know, the reality was that Narendra Modi, as Chief Minister, had done his best. Now, the issue around the review of the BBC's tax affairs, I understand, is nothing new. This has been going on for quite some time, and obviously there have been discussions between the Inland Revenue here, the income tax authorities here, and the BBC. Obviously this is a survey where the income tax authorities have looked to gather the evidence to establish if the BBC is doing anything wrong. I would say quite openly, it's the BBC's job in operating within India is to make sure they're accorded with the rules and regulations, and I'm sure it'll be cleared up very quickly. But you know, that's up to the authorities, the tax authorities. It's also up to the BBC to make sure they're accorded with the rules that operate here. And I think there's a risk that a lot of the media have immediately said, "Oh my goodness me, this is some form of attack on the media." Personally, I don't see it that way. I think it's a review, it's a survey. At the moment there haven't been suggestions of charges or anything like that. So we are in the position whereby let the authorities operate, let the BBC act as they have done, in an open and transparent way, providing access to all the records and all the information, and then let the tax authorities come to their conclusions. And I trust that will be cleared up very quickly, because it's the benefit of the tax authorities and for the BBC. Let's be very clear. The BBC is not an arm of the British government. In fact, the BBC is frequently critical of the British government, and actually, to be fair, critical of all British governments there have ever been. That's their job. Their job is to ask questions, to look for evidence. But the key here is you can ask questions, but when there's evidence to the contrary, and it's quite clearly not the case, then you shouldn't be casting aspersions. And I think that's the difference here, which I think is extremely regrettable, because it would seem as if there was some sort of agenda with the BBC to disrupt UK-India relations, and I think that's a great shame. I asked our Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, within the Chamber, Foreign Office questions, to actually make clear the government's policy. And of course he made clear the BBC is an independent organisation. They must do whatever they choose to do. But it is not the policy of the British government. The one thing I agreed with, by the way, within this propaganda video, was the final comments, which said that Narendra Modi and the BJP government will probably be re-elected next time and the time after that. And so they deserve it, because the Indian government have done a remarkable job under Narendra Modi of transforming the economy in India.